Good morning, everybody. This is Ed Avis speaking. I'm the Managing Director of APDSP, and I want to welcome you to our webinar this morning, which is a very pertinent topic right now. It's restarting your sales after COVID. What has changed and what has not. I want to remind you that today's event will be recorded, so you can watch it later if you want to, or you can share it with other people in your organization. Also, we welcome questions. So please, if you have any questions during the presentation, go ahead and ask them using the questions tab on your screen. If you don't see that questions tab, press the orange little arrow on your screen, and that should reveal that tab. Today's speaker is someone who has shared his expertise with us several times before. Dave is the author of 3 books and more than 300 articles on sales, marketing, and management. He has shared with us many times various sales training programs, and he's a regular writer for APDSP's website. So you probably know him, but if not, you are going to enjoy today's presentation, I'm sure. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. Dave, are you with us?
I am with you, and I want to add my welcome. It's been an interesting couple of months, hasn't it? It was scary when we watched it all shut down. I'm not going to pretend that it's not scary as we watch it open up again. But this is what we do. So we're going to get back to work. We're going to get back to some semblance of normal. We are hopefully going to get back to high levels of profitability and success. But I think we all know that there's challenges here. We're going to have to face up to those challenges. We're going to have to overcome the challenges. And part of my perspective for you today is that there are some new challenges. Some things have definitely changed, but there are also some old, familiar, fundamental challenges. And I don't want to lose sight of those as we get restarted. In fact, it's worth thinking about this. It's worth thinking about the chance to reboot, to rebuild strong fundamentals, to clear out some of the garbage and clear out some of the bad habits, and get started on the right track this time around. Now, before we get too far into that, a couple of lessons that we've learned. I think we've learned. If we haven't learned, we really need to learn. Lesson number 1 is that everything is great until it isn't. Over the last couple of months, I've talked to a whole bunch of printers who told me that this was the worst time that this could happen because we were off to such a great start this year. It was going to be a record year. Everything was really humming. But it just took one thing outside of our control to take the whole thing off the rails. You always got to be careful about thinking everything is wonderful. You got to keep working at it all of the time. And then I also have to tell you that I've had some conversations with printers who told me that this couldn't happen at a worse time because we were off to a bad start, and then things went from bad to even worse. Things can definitely get worse. Things can definitely get worse if we're not doing the right things all the time. All right, so what has changed in terms of sales? The obvious thing that has changed in terms of selling is that getting face-to-face, physically face-to-face with the people you're selling to and the people that you're hoping to sell you is a lot less likely in any kind of near future. Of course, I want you to consider that this is an acceleration of a trend that's been going on for quite some time. When I first started out in sales, it seemed like any buyer's default position when a salesperson called was, sure, I'll make time for you. You know, maybe they wouldn't have time right now, but it was usually possible. for a salesperson to get an appointment with a likely suspect. Over the last few years, it's become harder and harder still, even without COVID-19. So this isn't a revolution, it's an evolution of what was going on. The other side of that coin is that getting face-to-face virtually using technology has really become mainstream. I mean, for 10 years, people have been video conferencing with some level of regularity and some level of success. But there was huge resistance on the part of most people because it was better and it was easier just to meet face to face. These days, since we can't meet face to face, and I'm not even talking about with salespeople here, I'm talking about with teammates. I'm talking about with family. People know how to Zoom. They know how to Skype. They know how to hang out. They know how to do GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. They know how to do all of these things, and they're not strange things anymore. So virtual face-to-face is going to be part of our lives in the future, and I think that's a good thing. What else has changed? If we take it down to a purely product level, well, we're seeing increased demand for products, for print products that support social distancing, signage, wall graphics, floor graphics, stuff like that. We are seeing decreased demand for print products to support live events. Ed and I were talking about that before we brought you all online. This morning we were sharing our thoughts on the trade show and meeting business over the next couple of years. We are not usually positive about the outlook for the next couple of years, but I will share with you my thought, which Ed seemed to get a kick out of. I think for the next 3, 4, 5 years, trade shows are going to continue to decline in popularity. And again, this is a trend that we have seen over the last several years, certainly in our industry. But then, I think sometime maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now, somebody's going to have the brilliant idea to run a big trade show. And most of us will have forgotten what this time in our lives were like, and I think we'll embrace that. That remains to be seen. That's my theory, that's my opinion. Let's talk about what else has changed, though. We're seeing budget reductions. We're seeing budget pressure when it comes to print, when it comes to signage, when it comes to marketing, other than the necessary stuff to reopen in these times. But again, that's not something that just started yesterday or even 65 days ago. Those are issues that all of us have been facing for a while. What else should we consider during this restart? Well, one of the things to consider is that, just plain fact, some of your customers have not or will not survive this. Some of your customers have already closed and they're never going to open up again. Some of them are going to come back in much different shape as much smaller companies than they were 3 months ago, at least for the start. Looking at the other side of that coin, though, some of your competitors, some other printing companies have closed and will not open, or they will be weakened by this experience. I have a client in Florida who pretty much closed their doors and let all of their people go very early on in this whole mess. Their number one designer, well, their only graphic designer, and their key printer operator, both decided to leave Florida and move closer to their families. Those two people are gone. They're not coming back, and that company has been weakened by the way it approached this crisis. Specific companies that you may know about, just a general statement about the industry, it's going to be different. If you come out of this even relatively strong, that's a good thing. And if you come out of this relatively strong and working hard to do the right things, that can be a really good thing. This is a time to be visible in the marketplace. Think about this too. I like to say that if a salesperson is not hearing the words, I'm happy with my current printer, very, very frequently, that salesperson is not doing enough prospecting. Well, this is a time when many of those people who have said in the past, I'm happy with their current printer, maybe aren't so happy, maybe won't be so happy in the future as everybody gets opened up. Get out there, talk to people. Go out there and try and talk to people who've never even given you the time of day in the past. If you thought that they were worthwhile prospects back then, treat them as worthwhile prospects right now. Now, we got to be virtual salespeople, all right? There's not going to be as much physical face-to-face as we would like. So what's that going to take? It's going to take three things, in my opinion. First is a solid infrastructure. Second is a good attitude. And beyond that, good selling strategy. What do I mean by infrastructure? First and foremost, if you're going to have to do stuff on the internet, especially stuff like video conferencing, you have to have enough bandwidth in order to make that happen. So here we are right now, and I am using, according to the dial that I looked at earlier on the computer, I'm using 60% of the bandwidth in my home here in my office right now. My wife is a school teacher, an elementary school teacher. She does 2 one-hour sessions on Zoom with her kids every day. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, she does a usually 60-minute meeting with her team, the other 4th grade teachers in her school. When she is doing Zoom, she is also using approximately 60% of the bandwidth in our house. So we had to make a special arrangement today that she would get offline from her meeting at 10:50 Eastern Time, so that I could get on this meeting to be with you. If you have bandwidth issues in your shop, or if your staff, if your salespeople are going to be working from home and have bandwidth issues in their homes, that needs to be dealt with. Platform expertise, if you're going to use Zoom, you got to know how to use Zoom. I bet you all of you have had an issue with somebody, with us it's been grandma, who just can't make it work. This isn't a time for professionalism, so it's important that you're not the one who's goofing up the conversation. I think it's critically important that every salesperson works from a CRM, Salesforce.com, ACT, less annoying CRM, one-page CRM, any sort of CRM program that might be incorporated into your operating software. That's a strong belief that I've had for 20 years since I first started using ACT, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit further along. That's not anything new. That doesn't have anything to do with COVID-19. That's just good, solid sales fundamentals. And then the last thing that I want you to think about, and this is, again, in terms of professionalism, is if you're going to run Zoom meetings, it's worth investing some time and some money in building something, either in your shop or your salespeople in their homes, that looks sort of like a studio. Here's a couple of images that I want to show you. The one on the left is an image of me in my office using the camera in my computer. The one on the right is me in my office using my phone, which is mounted on basically a camera stand to hold it up at the height and angle that I want it at. And I'm not going to tell you, I'm not pretending that either of these is as good as it could be, but there's a difference between the left and the right, isn't there? And there can be an even greater difference between the left or the right and something that you all could come up with. Think about the people that you're watching on television these days, on the news station, on the sports shows. Think about how they've set them up to do video in their homes. There's been a whole thing going on, people evaluating the books that people have in their houses. spend the money, invest the time, spend the money to create a professional image. And by the way, even in the better of these two images, the one on the right, look at my polo shirt. Do I look like a professional salesperson? I think I do not. And I think I also deserve a fair amount of courage for putting that picture up there as an illustration. If you can't laugh at yourself, folks, who can you laugh at? All right. Attitude, in terms of attitude, number one on the list is don't complain. This is what we have to deal with. You have to play the cards that you are dealt. These are the cards that we've been given. But also give some thought to the corresponding benefit for not driving to and from the office, not driving to and from sales calls every day. There is pretty significant time savings here, which means that you and your salespeople should have more time to do more stuff, And then finally, this whole video conferencing thing may finally give us a medium that appeals to the millennials. And I know plenty of salespeople, plenty of business owners who've been complaining to me about those specific people. You can't get them to meet with you. All they want to do is text and email and Instagram and Zoom. All right. We need to work on their chosen medium, but let me say it differently. Now we get to work on their chosen medium. In terms of strategy, two questions. What else can we do with video? What else can we do via the internet? Both of those things are really interrelated. Let's start with what else we can do via the internet. If you do not have online ordering, you're way behind the curve right now. If you do not have e-commerce capability and the ability to set up an e-commerce site, an e-store for one of your customers, you're way behind the curve right now. If you do have those things available, those are products that people are going to be more interested in the future than some of them have in the past. And I also want you to be thinking, all the time be thinking of, what else can we do this way? And just in terms of what else can we do with video, I bet most of you have looked at your shop and your physical space as a sales asset over the years. I know an awful lot of printers who have good-looking print shops, and getting a prospect or a customer in for a shop tour, maybe in for a lunch and learn shop tour, has proven to be a significant marketing strategy. All right, folks, if we can't get them into the shop, it's time to think about what we can do with a video shop tour. By the way, something else to consider. Everybody who's been working from home recently has had more time available to do their work than they did when they worked in the office and got interrupted with 19 different people every day. I've been talking about time management with my daughter for the last couple of years. She's been struggling to get all of her work done every day. She's the housing director of housing for a affordable housing nonprofit organization in New York City. And every day has been a struggle for her to get her work done because she's been so involved in all of the other people's work who keep walking into her office and saying, Alice, can you help me with this? Over the last couple months, without those interruptions, she's caught up with her work, and now she's finding that she can reach out to other people and ask them, what do you need from me? All right, one more thing that has stayed the same. Your core selling challenge in terms of sales has not changed at all. COVID-19, face-to-face, video conferencing, anything else. Your core challenge is still to get people to engage with you. And here's my definition of engaging. To talk seriously, and then, if you give them a good enough reason for them to think seriously about maybe buying from you. It's all about engaging. It's all about talking. So let's see if we can do some things to make them happen. Oh yeah, one more thought. The most effective salespeople, virtual or otherwise, drive their sales cycle. They're proactive. They're not just along for the ride. So I've built myself a little program that I want to share with you now based on the idea that our sales cycle typically has 5 stages. The prospecting stage, the quoting and competing stage. And then if that goes well, you get the first few orders. And then hopefully if that goes well, you hit the good times. And then ultimately, you're going to get to the downhill stage. All right, so let's talk about prospecting. And let me define this as the activity chain which starts with the identification of likely suspects and ends with the qualification of real prospects. Let me throw some terminology at you here. I think there's 4 kinds of people on the buying side of your selling equation. I call them suspects, prospects, customers, and maximized customers. And the way the progression works is they're suspects when you think or maybe hope they might be prospects. They're only prospects, though, real prospects, when you know for sure that they qualify, and I'll tell you what that means in just a moment. You only call them customers when they're actually buying from you. And I think that's an important distinction because I bet you'll agree. You engage differently with people who are already buying from you than you do with people who haven't bought anything from you yet. And then finally, they become maximized customers when you are getting maximum value from the relationship. And by the way, this doesn't mean just selling them everything that you could sell them. There's more to this. And I'll come back and talk about that a little bit further along. For now, in order to consider somebody a fully qualified prospect, I say they need to pass 3 tests. Test number 1, they're going to buy exactly what you sell. Exactly the kind of print and related services that you sell. Let me throw an example at you. Company A buys a lot of small format document sort of printing and quite a bit of what we like to call large format graphics. I say that they probably qualify in terms of number 1 for you. Company B buys basically one thing every year. They reprint their catalog. It's 64 pages long with a bunch of inserts jammed into it just to complicate the bindery. And they buy between 250,000 and 350,000 of them. That's the only printed item they buy every year. And I suspect that for most of you, that company really is not a product because they don't buy exactly what you sell, which is not to say that you could maybe find a source to outsource that project, but it is to say that it makes it a difficult sale. They are prospects if their needs fit your strike zone. Think of it that way. And then the second test they got to pass is that they got to buy enough of whatever it is that you sell to make pursuing them worthwhile in the first place. And I don't know exactly what that means in terms of how much volume potential somebody has to have in order to qualify as a real prospect for you. But I will tell you something that I know for a fact. I know there are way too many salespeople waste way too much of their time chasing after minnows when they should be going after bigger fish. And then the third and ultimately the most important of these criteria is in order to consider somebody a fully qualified prospect, they got to show some real interest in buying from you. I was talking to a salesperson last Wednesday. I'm just getting started with this salesperson, breaking out of COVID with some sales coaching. And I asked her to send me her prospect list. She has a list of 9 companies on her prospect list, which first of all is not nearly enough for the situation that she is in. But second of all, when I started asking her questions on where are you in terms of building a relationship with some of these people, she had never talked with 5 of the 9. They had never returned a phone call or responded to an email. Now, I'm not saying that she should disqualify those people as suspects, but I am saying that she needs not to be thinking them as real fully qualified prospects right now. All right, so what are the prospecting challenges? Number one, you got to be able to identify good suspects. Number two, you got to be able to identify the decision maker. Number three, you got to be able to connect with the decision maker, and then you got to be able to secure a meeting. And whether that's a virtual meeting or a face-to-face meeting, you got to be able to get to a real engagement conversation. How do you do that? All of that? Well, advice element A for identifying suspects is look at your current customers and then make a list of companies and organizations that have something in common with those companies. In terms of identifying decision makers, think about your current customers and think about the people who you actually sell to at those companies, who are actually your current customers, and think about their titles. And then you go looking for the people who have those titles or those job responsibilities at the companies that you've identified as suspects. And I'm not talking about having a guy, one of your customers, and thinking that his title is print buyer. In my recent experience, I haven't encountered anybody whose title is print buyer. I know people who are print buyers, lowercase p, lowercase b, as part of their jobs as marketing directors or facility managers or lead engineers or whatever else. Print buyer is not a title, but if you know the actual title of the person, it makes it easier to figure out who the right person is. The next issue is to connect with the decision maker for the purpose of securing a meeting. Here's my recommendation for that process. And this is shortened because we're time limited here. We got a lot to talk about in barely an hour. I could spend at least an whole hour talking about these 4 bullet points. But here's a recommendation. Once you identify a suspect, send them an introductory email, which basically says, I'm interested in talking to you, so I'm going to call you on the phone and ask for an appointment. Not a long email, not a jam everything that there is to know about our company email. Just a first tentative step. Just a first step that positions a salesperson to call on the phone and say, hey, my name is Dave Fellman from Dave's Documents. I emailed you yesterday. I promised that I was going to call to see if we could set up an appointment. How does your schedule look for later on this week, early next week? I use Zoom. Does that work for you? Would you prefer Skype or some other platform? One of the critical factors for salespeople to understand is that we're not in the home run business. We're in the singles business. We're in the moving the runner ahead business. Let me switch sports to football. We're in the moving the chains business. Selling is not an event. Making a sale is not an event. It's a process. The more that you try to build into any single step in the process, the less likely it is that you're going to be successful at it. Think in terms of what small step do I do first? And then what's my follow-up step? And then, based on what happens on the follow-up step, what do I do next? Think about some of the predictable obstacles and objections to this kind of prospecting. The first is voicemail. Every salesperson I know, every salesperson I work with spends more time talking to people's voicemails than they do to actual people, especially in the prospecting process. So what that means is that you got to have a plan for dealing with voicemail. And knowing that it's unlikely that people are going to return your first voicemail message, that means that your plan has to include maybe a second voicemail message, maybe a second email, maybe something sent through the mail, a plan. And a plan for when people say, I'm really busy right now, because they say that. And a plan for when people say, I don't need anything right now, because they say that too. A plan for when they say, I'm happy with my current supplier. Like I said earlier, anybody who's not hearing that regularly is not doing enough prospecting. We're under contract. Send me some literature. Your price is too high. Look, there's a limited number of things that they say when they're not saying yes. It is possible, and beyond that, it's really good strategy to have a plan for what you're going to say when you run into these predictable obstacles and objections. All right, so again, there's a lot to talk about in relative little time here. I could tell you exactly what I think you should say to voicemail, or what I think you should say when they say I'm happy with my current supplier. In the interest of time, though, I want to make you this offer. At the bottom of this slide is my email address, dmf@davefellman.com. If you send me an email and say, send me the excerpt from your book, I will send you exactly that. I will send you an excerpt from my book on selling more printing, which deals with all of these specific topics and a little bit more. And along with that, I'll send you a link to a website where you could get a special offer on the book if you're interested, if you like that idea after you read what I have to say about these obstacles and objections. dmf@davefellman.com, and just ask me to send you the thing. Now, changing subjects a little bit, working our way into the quoting and dealing with price objections stage. I want to talk a little bit about navigation, which is defined as the science of getting yourself from one place to another place. Just like making a sale, getting someplace is a process, not an event. It starts with setting your destination, and then you plot your course. You make your plan. As you plot your course, you try and avoid the known hazards. You try and anticipate any other hazards. And when you've done all that, you can leave. And if you follow your plan, follow your plotted course, you give yourself the best possible chance of arriving, of getting where you're going and being able to celebrate. So now, let's ask this question in terms of competing for work. Your initial destination is to get the order, right? But beyond that, it's to get the order at your price. And even beyond that, it's to establish that your value, the value that you bring to the party, is real, tangible, worth paying for, and in fact, that your value is greater than any of their other options. So I want to tell you a quick little story. I heard Seth Godin speak at a conference a few years ago. Seth Godin, who's written, I think, 22 books on selling and marketing. He's a great writer. He's a great speaker. He's a very funny guy. This was not a printing industry event, but he happened to mention the printing industry. And he said that this particular industry seems to be trying to convince me that I should buy their products from whoever offers me the lowest price. And he went on from there. You know, he went on talking, making his point, continuing his presentation. But I went to the base of the stage afterwards, and I introduced myself to him, and I told him I'm a printing industry guy, and I wondered, can you tell me more about what you meant by that? What he told me was that he gets a lot of calls from salespeople, from printing salespeople. And what they always say is, I think I can save you money on your printing. Can I quote on your next order? And he said, he's always willing to let a salesperson give him a quote. It's no big deal. You know, he's already created the specs. He's usually emailing them to the printers he's been working with. No big deal to include another salesperson, another company in a group email. So he said he's always willing to let a salesperson give him a quote. And then he said, so they call to follow up with a quote. If they call to follow up in the first place, which is a whole other conversation we should have someday. He said, if they call to follow up, they always say, so how did my price look? And he said, I'll always tell them. And I usually tell them your price was, fine, your price was competitive, but your price was not so low that it gives me a reason to give you this order over printers that I've dealt with in the past. And then he says, what they always say is, well, can you give me a chance to try it again, to sharpen up my pencil? Now, I don't believe for a second that every printing salesperson always operates that way, but I know from my own experience that that's pretty common strategy. So think about this. How many times have you said, we're not the lowest price, but we bring a lot of value? How many times have your salespeople said that? How many times have you tried to explain to your salespeople that we're not about the lowest price, we're about value and charging accordingly? We say stuff like that, but then we behave differently. What does it say to Seth Godin when a guy says, hey, let me quote on your next job, I bet I can save you some money? What does it say to Seth Godin when you call up on the phone and the first thing you say is, how did my price look? And then what do you say to Seth Godin if the next thing you say after learning that your price is not going to win you the order is, well, can I offer you a lower price? I think what you're saying is that you're all about price. And I also think what you're saying is that, oh, by the way, you can't really trust me because the first exchange we had here is I tried to get you to pay more than I was willing to settle for. All right. Backing away from that for a moment, I want to talk a little bit about the first meeting, the first engagement, the first substantive conversation. Just two things. I consider this to be the heart of the opportunity stage. I want it to be a conversation, not a presentation. Questions, not statements on your part. Because I think this first engagement is your opportunity to find some ways to differentiate yourself when it comes to the point where you probably have to defend your price. And I also think that it's a good idea not to shoot off all of your big sales and marketing guns in that first meeting. Think about this. Think about your own sales experience. Have you ever gone out to a meeting and you pretty much shoot it all off right there? You make your presentation, you tell them everything that you want them to know, and that does not result in getting where you want to go. So you're thinking, all right, well, I need to talk to this guy again, but I don't know what to say. I like the idea of engineering a process by which your first conversation is just about learning about them. And then at the end of that conversation, you say something like this. You say, all right, this has been great. I feel like I have learned a lot about your situation, about your wants, about your needs, about what you're trying to do here. What I would like to do now is go back to my place. I'd like to think about what you told me today. I'd like to do some research. I'd like to talk to my experts. I'd like to get a proposal together for you and then come back and tell you exactly how I think we can improve on what you've had so far, on exactly how we're the best company, I'm the best salesperson for this particular job. That gives you the opportunity to avoid simply giving people quotes on their potential orders, which is basically a number that says this is how many dollars I want to charge you. That puts you into the realm of presenting a proposal. To me, the big difference between a quote and proposal is simply this. A quote is just a number. A proposal includes that number, but it also includes your thoughts on why they should buy it from you. One quick thought on presenting a proposal. The best way to do this is not to present your whole proposal and then ask them for the order. The best way is to present your proposal in sections or segments, which is sort of the natural way to build one of these things. I would like to tell you about our people. Now I would like to tell you about our quality control. Now I would like to show you samples of very similar work we've done. And at the end of each of those stages, you get to ask, what do you think so far? Am I making sense so far? Am I starting to sound like the kind of salesperson? Or are we starting to sound like the company that you want to do business with. That's a lot better strategy than getting to the end, because it gives you an opportunity to deal with any obstacles, any objections as they come up. And it also gives you an opportunity to keep price in its place. And by that I mean, never lead with your quote when you're bringing a proposal. First, build the foundation of value. Try to build the foundation of value, and then you can give them the price. The best way, by far the best way to try and keep price in its place. And that actually brings up another topic which I've often wondered about. Why is it so hard for salespeople to ask for the order? I mean, I've had salespeople tell me this a million times. I'm fine at making my pitch, at presenting my proposal. I just freeze up when it's time to ask for a commitment. So is that a fear of rejection? Is it a fear of a price objection? Or maybe is it overthinking the whole thing? See, I think the best closing question is directly connected to the best closing strategy, which is really you telling them what you think and then asking them what they think. This is what I think. What do you think? That to me is the best closing strategy. Hopefully they say yes. But let's consider this. What are they saying if they're not saying yes? Here's three possibilities. One, we're looking at other proposals. All right? You can't keep them from doing that. But if they tell you that they're looking at other proposals, there's a couple of things that you want to know. One is, when do you expect to make your decision? And the other is not, what sort of things are you going to consider in making your decision? Let's go back to my thoughts on the first substantive conversation about questions, not statements. That first meeting is where you want to talk about what kind of things they're going to think about in making their decision. You need to know that before you get to the proposal stage. In fact, you probably need to know when they need the product delivered before you get to that stage, which really tells you something about when they need to make their decision. Still in all, it might be appropriate to find out exactly when the decision is forthcoming. But here's the thing you really want to know. Based on what you've heard from me today, this is a situation where you've told them what you think. They say we're looking at other proposals. What you really want to know is, based on what you've heard today, would you be comfortable in doing business with us? Have I convinced you? At the very least, have I convinced you that I can handle this order? If the answer is yes, then you just need to figure out when and how you follow up. If the answer is no, they're telling you, I'm not convinced, which means that you've got an issue. But it also means you have an opportunity, because you know right here and right now that they're not convinced, which means you're still in the competition. Sadly, what most salespeople will do is they'll make their proposal, they'll leave their quote, and then they'll leave. And then they'll follow up, and then they'll find out, hopefully, why they didn't get the order, and that may provide some intel, some information that helps them win the next order. But my position is that if you approach strategy this way, you still have a chance to win this order before it gets given to somebody else. And then a third issue, especially when there is a price involved, is that sometimes your price is a problem. So all that means is that you are being invited to negotiate. That is not a bad thing. That is a good thing. It means that you're being given an opportunity to defend your price before they make a decision. Another key point is that when you are invited to negotiate, there's actually three things on the table, three things to negotiate: value, cost, and price. And this is exactly the order in which you should approach any negotiation that you find yourself in. Negotiating value is really just all about telling them why you think they should buy from you anyway, even though your price is higher. Why is that? I don't know. But it might be because they've had quality issues with their previous supplier. It might be because they've had service issues with their previous supplier. It might be because this project is extremely quality sensitive because it's a pet project of the company's CEO. It might be because the project is extremely time sensitive and the buyer perceives his or her job to be at risk if something goes wrong. These are the things that you might learn in the first substantive conversation if you're not focused on telling them all about you. I think that first conversation, as much as anything else, is an opportunity to prepare yourself for price suggestions that are likely to come up a little bit down the line. And basically, this is your opportunity to maybe tell people, yes, I know our price is higher than others. I know that you can find a lower price somewhere else. But let me tell you why I think this is the lowest price that you can pay and get what you've told me you want or told me you need. Now, the good news is that sometimes that strategy works. And the other good news is that even when it doesn't, it just means that plan A didn't work. Let's move on to plan B. Plan B, negotiating cost, is all about the application of product knowledge. And this is relevant to the situation where you find that a price objection wasn't really a price objection. Turns out it was a budget objection. All right. So if I tell you, I'm sure there's nothing wrong with your price of, $1,100 for this project. The only problem is I only have $1,000 in the budget. Wouldn't you probably be able to make some suggestions, some recommendation to change the specs that would reduce the cost of this particular project while preserving your profit margin? And that's a good thing too. Sometimes plan A works. If not, on to plan B, and sometimes that works. If not, sometimes the only place we can go is plan C. Negotiating price is about lowering your price, is giving up some profit. And to my mind, that's not always a bad thing. I mean, there were certain situations where I'm happy enough to give away some of my profit margin to get a particular order, maybe to get my foot in the door. So winning the order would qualify, but I want you to consider that there might be other things that you can gain in return for a price concession. I have clients who've gotten referrals. I have clients who've gotten commitments for more business. I've had clients who've gotten something else, which makes it more of a win-win situation. All right, my closing thoughts on this stage of the process. Most sellers are weak, and that makes buyers strong. Most sellers don't negotiate value very well. They go immediately to lowering the price. And on this subject, in your future, let's make sure that Seth Godin is talking about somebody else. Let's not be the ones who make it all about price. All right, now we get to go quickly through the next three stages, the final three stages. The first few orders. You get the order. All right, you've heard the expression, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. It turns out that's not completely true. It turns out that business puts you in a situation where you have to continue to make a good impression day after day, order after order. But the first order that you do for somebody in particular is absolutely positively a critical first impression. So to paraphrase Yoda, know or you do not know. There is no assume. After every first order, and also think about this, after every next order, after a future order that didn't go as well as it should have, you need to make sure that you have a happy, satisfied customer. You need to make sure, because if they are not happy with you on the first order, or a subsequent order, that does not reinforce the idea that they can trust you to take care of them all of the time. In fact, that sort of situation hastens the downhill stage. I'll come back to that in a moment. Now, let's talk about the good times. And as I said to you earlier, every one of your customers is a prospect to become a maximized customer. And they become maximized customers when you're getting maximum value from the relationship. All right. I believe that every one of your current customers provides you with 3 levels of value. The first level of value is the value of what they're buying from you now. The second value is the value of what they could be buying from you. The third level of value is the value of influence and the ways in which your current customers can help you to develop new ones. All right, what's important about the first level of value is that you protect it. So here, we're talking about customer contact and customer satisfaction. Actually, we're talking about customer contact and customer service. So what does customer contact mean? Consider this. Here's some very, very fundamental selling wisdom. It is never the buyer's responsibility to communicate with the seller. It is always the seller's responsibility to communicate with the buyer. And that actually means 2 things. One of the things it means is that it's not their responsibility to understand you. It's your responsibility to make sure they understand you and you understand them, to make sure that real communication happens. But in this specific application, the other thing that it means is that it's not their responsibility to stay in touch with you. It's your responsibility to stay in touch with them. Now, here's a complicated factor. You can damage a relationship with too much contact. You can smother a customer. That's not a good thing. But you can also do damage by not being in touch frequently enough. How frequently is enough? I don't know. That's an individual customer thing. But here's what I recommend that you do. Establish an interval, some number of weeks that you will simply never, ever again let go by without either you hearing from them or them hearing from you. How do you manage something like that? That takes us back to something I said earlier, that I think every salesperson should have a CRM, should be using ACT or Salesforce or some other product. Fundamentally, a CRM does 2 things for you. It's the place where you put all of your customer data, names, addresses, phone numbers, notes, history, quotes, all of that stuff like that. But even more importantly, it's the place where you tell yourself what you want to do next with each individual customer and when you want to do it. Another very fundamental concept. I think after every contact or attempted contact with anybody that you're selling to or trying to sell to, you should always ask yourself 2 questions. What do I do next? And when do I do it? And then it's obvious, I hope, that you got to have some mechanism to be reminded of those plans that you're making for yourself. Any of the full-featured CRMs will do that for you. And I don't care which one you use, just as long as it can do what you need it to do. By the way, when I send you the special offer on my book, along with the excerpt about dealing with obstacles and objections, there's a whole chapter in the book about how I use my CRM to do these sort of things. Now, on to the second level of value. The second level of value is the value of what they could be buying from you. This is all about customer contact and customer education, or to put those 2 things together, it's about using customer contact for the purpose of customer education. To use customer contact for more than just how are you doing, it's to use customer contact to say, let me tell you about another part of our product line that you never bought from us. I want to make sure that you know we can do this, and I want to make sure that you know that that we're capable of doing this and that we'd be interested in doing it for you. Now on to the value of influence, which is another one of the things that you can do when you're staying in touch with your customers. How many of you have gained a new customer in the, let's say, fourth quarter of last year, or even since we've been in this COVID mess? How many of you have gained a new customer from a referral? I bet everybody's shaking your head yes. Now I got to ask this question. Was it the kind of referral where somebody said something nice about you to somebody else and that resulted in that person calling you and becoming a customer? Or was it the kind of referral that came because you were proactive and because you asked your customers, do you know anybody else who might be interested in talking with me? There's nothing wrong with what I call passive referrals, but you're really missing an opportunity if you're not also working at gaining active referrals from your happy customers. 3 levels of value. When you're getting maximum value from the relationship, then we get to consider somebody a maximized customer, and that's a good thing. Now the downhill stage. The 3 most important things about the downhill stage. Number 1 is to delay it. And you do that by keeping promises, providing good and maybe exceptional customer service, staying in touch with your customers, all of those things. The second critical thing to understand about the downhill stage is to understand it. We all know all too well right now that you can lose volume from a customer through no fault of your own. If they're buying less printing, we're selling less printing, and we have to understand that. And at the very least, that's not our fault, the situation that we find ourselves in right now. But if you have lost customers because you've screwed up, because of quality failures, because of service failures, because of relationship failures, because of any of that sort of thing, it's important to understand it, because every mistake is an opportunity to learn and to put processes, procedures, whatever, in place so that particular problem doesn't happen again. And then the other thing that's critical about the downhill stage is knowing that even in the best of times, we're probably going to lose some business, we're probably going to lose some customers, and in all honesty, we're probably going to lose some business and some customers through our own fault, not just no fault of our own situations. If you want to do the best thing you can to protect yourself from that, let's go all the way around to the prospecting stage. And the idea that if you have other people somewhere in the process of thinking about maybe buying from you, you at least put yourself into the best possible position of gaining business to replace the business you've lost. All right, that's what I got for you. This is my contact information. Dave Feldman, dnf@davefeldman.com, 919-606-9714. And I guess I left us just a minute or two for questions if we've got them.
All right, thank you very much. Let me remind attendees that you can ask questions on your panel there. Dave, I have one question for you. You mentioned during the negotiation conversation that one kind of point of negotiation could be to ask for a referral, and I think that's something that's a little unfamiliar. Can you briefly maybe walk us through a conversation where you might ask for someone for a referral during that stage in the sale?
I got an actual story for you. This is one of my favorite stories. So the situation was this. My client calling on a prospect, quoting on, I don't remember what the number was, but it was some number of window graphics, cling graphics. And during the course of the conversation, My client had learned that the last order for window graphics had been all messed up, which is why he was even getting the opportunity to compete for it in the first place. So again, I don't remember the exact numbers, but my guy quoted $600 for these window graphics, and the buyer, the prospect, said, "Look, that's more money than I spent in the past, and I understand that, you know, I had problems the last time. I bought cheap and I got what I paid for, but I don't want to go back to my boss and tell him that I need another $100 this time. If you could help me out on this, I would be really appreciative." So this was actually a situation where my client learned right then and there that this is not a price issue, this is a budget issue. And he could have made an alternate suggestion. One immediate suggestion, he could have suggested making the thing smaller, which would reduce the cost and got it down to that budget number. But instead, and I thought he was really inspired, he said, "All right, I can do this, but I want to ask for something in return from you. You're going to love the product. You're going to love doing business with us. I'm very confident about that. So what I want to ask of you is, when we come to deliver and install the window clings, I want to come with my guy, with my installer, and I want to make it like an appointment with you, so that you can be there. You can see them. You can see them go up in your windows, and then when you're just blown away, you know, with us, like I know you're going to be, I just want to ask you to stand in front of one of the signs and say a few nice things about us while I, you know, videotape you with my cell phone. Would you do that for me in return for me helping you out with your boss?" The buyer agreed, and it turned into a 21-second video testimonial, which I think my client still has at his website. And even beyond that, and this goes back to something I said about strategy earlier about what else can we do with video. He attaches that video clip. He and his salespeople have attached that video clip to emails that they're sending out to suspects as part of the process of trying to get through to people when they're having trouble getting them to return phone calls or emails. So that's turned out to be a very well worthwhile tool.
Well, that's great. Very interesting. Thank you. All right, we don't have any other questions. So Dave, let me just thank you again for your presentation today. And attendees, I hope you got a lot of value out of that. And remember that this event was recorded and it'll be posted on the website later on today or tomorrow. So please stay tuned for that and stay tuned for future APDSP events. Thank you very much, everybody. This webinar is over.